What's up, fellow internet denizens? I like Star Wars Legends. I think the new canon is fine for the most part when it's not a war between directors. What I miss about the old canon, though, was the weird stuff. That's what gave it its charm. Let's talk about the weird bits of Star Wars lore, the good and the bad. Okay, so at one point, Leia is sent on a diplomatic mission to Kashyyyk, where one of the envoys she speaks with is a Wookiee, but he has a speech impediment that makes him sound basically like a human. He helps her learn Shiro-Wook, and it turns out that all of these growls are incredibly nuanced. I just find that really neat, as linguistics is one of my special interests. Additionally, Twi'lek incorporate their head tails in their language as sort of a tone indicator. Other species with tentacles on their heads like Nautilans and Togruta can learn this as well, and humans cannot. Also, apparently the thicker your head tails, the sexier you are, according to Tales from Jabba's Palace. Speaking of language, let's talk about music, the coolest language of them all. If you are in any given cantina in the Star Wars galaxy, you will likely hear some form of jizz wailing. Yeah, that's the name of the music. I think most people kind of know what this is, but most people don't, however, know that a jizz box is one of the instruments that is used to make jizz. Have fun with that image. Let's talk about something a bit more serious now. One of my most vivid memories of Knight Errant is that there was a planet run by Sith children who had this neural network of Celentiums, or these rare, sentient, force-sensitive jellyfish. The jellyfish were tortured into madness and stored into these pipes, and they functioned kind of like amplifiers, allowing the children to dominate their planet, which is a terrifying image. I think this is the cool kind of weird. I love inhuman aliens, and I think that the exploitation of innately force-sensitive beings should be explored more. Alright, so did you notice those spider robot things in episode 6? Those are Bomar monks, who are so ascetic that they leave their own body behind and inhabit droids. Most Bomar monks keep their bodies, but some decide to put their brains in jars to achieve enlightenment, and this often results in psychosis. Some of these psychotic spider brains lived in Jabba's palace and served as spies for rival crime lords. Right after Jabba the Hutt's death, they ripped Bib Fortuna's brain out and put it into a spider walker. Speaking of weird cyborg critters, the Celentium are self-replicating sentient droids from another galaxy who kind of resemble echinoderms like starfish. They were presumably created by starfish, and their creators got wiped out in a supernova, and now they kind of just roam. They aspire to become these giant immortal balls about 50 kilometers wide. Lando Calrissian actually befriended a small 5-sided one and had a few adventures with him. Fun fact, these guys left their original galaxy behind because the biopunk Yuuzhan Vong were taking over and destroying all the machinery. I have another fun droid fact. That one bounty hunter droid with the Monster Energy can head, IG-88, hacked the second Death Star and was about to use it as a jumping off point in order to take over every other droid in the galaxy, as the Death Star was possibly the biggest communications nexus in the known galaxy at the time. The only thing that stopped him was the Death Star exploding. Naturally, the only person to notice this hack was Darth Sidious, who saw that the doors were sticking. This was actually a power move on IG-88's part. This was in Tales of the Bounty Hunters, if you're curious. Let's talk about Luke Skywalker's evil clone, Luke with 2 U's. In the Thrawn trilogy, Luke confronts the Dark Jedi Jerus Kabath, who is actually the clone of a Jedi who got lost in the unknown regions. Jerus cloned Luke using tech that was somehow faster than Kaminoan cloning tech, and he made Luke fight Luke. That was the one part of the Thrawn trilogy that made me groan. Had Luke not been there, the series would have been a perfect 5 out of 5. Also, the author behind the Thrawn trilogy made an April Fool's Day blog entry where there was a Luke with 3 U's and a Boba Fett. I can't take this seriously. Booba. Speaking of stuff that made me put down books, there are so many zombie viruses in the Star Wars galaxy that it's kind of stupid. There's the rat ghoul plague, which turns people into mutant zombies that bleed from their eyes. That one only really appeared in the comics, though. There's the Death Trooper virus, which actually was pretty cool. That book was cool. There's the Murakami Orchid virus, which was from a book written by the same author as the Death Troopers, and that one was very weird and revolved around a sentient flower. I didn't like that one as much. There were a couple of instances in Star the Clone Wars Wars, one where the Geonosian Queen sends out worms to possess people, and one where the Night Sisters use the Force to raise the dead and puppet them. There are a few others out there, but those are the ones that I know off the top of my head. So there's a star that's collapsing so hard it's turning into a gravity warping crystal, and there's a dimensional portal. This wall of golden jello named Weru comes out of it and starts a cult where it either heals people or kills them, depending on how hungry it is. Han Solo and Luke have to dive into the jello wall at one point to fish out Han's son Anakin, and we find out that you can breathe inside of this jello. This book also involves werewolves, centaurs, and children who don't act like children. This one's a bit less contentious than Weru, but I've still seen some people fight over it. I grew up reading the Dark Empire comics. This was the original Somehow Palpatine Returned, though this time it wasn't written by a spiteful director. Palpatine clones himself and possesses the clones and makes them decay, but this time he seduces Luke to the dark side, and we get to see a fleet of world devastators, which are like the destroyers from Rise of Skywalker, but instead of being Death Star adjacent, they just mess with a planet's gravity and weather, making it unlivable. We also get to see Leia trade to be a Jedi. This isn't that weird compared to like other Legends stuff, but I'm mentioning it here because Jar Jar Abrams himself definitely looked at Tom Veach and Cam Kennedy's work and changed a couple things around so he wouldn't be caught. I see you, Abrams. Speaking of stuff that I actually like, I am a huge fan of Legend of Drizzt. The author, R.A. Salvatore, killed Chewbacca in the first Yuuzhan Vong book. To be fair, it was a cool death and a good start to the series, but it's still weird that one of my favorite authors killed a major character in one of the most famous sci-fi franchises and then never wrote another Star Wars book again. When I was a kid, before the Clone Wars series came out, I wanted more Star Wars. I wasn't allowed to watch Revenge of the Sith because it was PG-13, so Dad found a workaround. Our local library had the live-action Ewok movies and we watched them together. I barely remember them, but what I do remember is that there was a horse. Why is there a horse on the Forest Moon? I have not seen any other horses in any other Star Wars media. Also, why do the Ewoks speak English in that one? This took place before Return of the Jedi, and in that, the Ewoks speak Ewok, and they don't seem to understand the humans. Also, the Ewok cartoon was a thing, and from everything that I've seen of it, everything on the damn Forest Moon is sentient. Speaking of things of interesting quality, everyone knows about the holiday special at this point. I'm just bringing it up here because this was the first canonical appearance of Boba Fett. He appeared in a cartoon in-universe when he fought cartoon Luke. This begs the question, was this in-universe RPF, or is this just a way that news was conveyed in-universe? I don't know. I only watched this once, and that was because Dad forced me to in order to get me to shut up about Revenge of the Sith. Finally, this one's cheating because it was never meant to be canon, but this is the reason I made this video. Alien Exodus by Robert J. Sawyer was supposed to be published in the early aughts, and then was canned for reasons that will soon become apparent. You see, this was supposed to be about how humans got into the Star Wars universe. Humans on Earth in the future are trying to escape Earth because computers have a plan to drug them and replace their names with serial numbers. A couple of these humans have familiar sounding names like Corelli and Solo. Their ship falls into a wormhole and is transported to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and they are intercepted by these hut-like aliens called Varlians who enslave them and force them to do hard labor alongside several other familiar species of aliens like Twi'lek and Bith and so on. The Force is stored in a crystal on the Varlian mothership, but gets released into the galaxy later on. One human taps into the Force and leaps high in the air, gaining him the name Skywalker. There are other bits that made me audibly groan, like how Corelli dies and the humans bury her on a newly discovered planet and name it after her. Corellia! Yay! Or how Skywalker's wife decides to write down these stories and have her descendants do the same, forming a Skywalker Saga, if you will. Holy hells, this makes me want to vomit. When I first went to see episode 7, I remember when minor characters would just be off to the side and like 5 people would just stand up and clap at the sight of their favorite glup shitto. This feels just as stupid. So that's all the weird Star Wars tidbits that I remember at the moment. I did leave some stuff out that made sense in context or just fit into the universe. For example, I think the Yuuzhan Vong are cool and they make sense as like sort of an endgame opponent, if you will. What do you guys think though? What weird stuff did I miss? Should I check out the new canon and compare the weirdness? I've been Alien Daydreamer and I am out. Bye!